Hello everyone, it's me Clayton. I just finished watching Be the Beginning, Season 2, Succession. Now when it comes to the Netflix anime, there certainly have been some hits and misses. But back in 2018, one of the decent hits was actually Be the Beginning, which was a series that seemed to mix supernatural action with a police mystery that happened to combine some great animation from Production IG with a fairly interesting story that felt like it could go somewhere with a follow-up. Well, we had to wait 3 entire years for a follow-up, but we finally got it. So, how does it fare? Let's get to the story. The story is that after the events of Season 1, Koku meets a friend of his named Kirasame, who we saw in a flashback in Season 1, and we presumed he was dead. That is, until he shows up here. With Keith Flick being kidnapped by Kirasame, and with him having ties to the king of the nation they're in, new information is revealed about the Reggies and about the world that the series takes place in, as Koku has to follow some specific orders from Kirasame or risk losing those he loves, including Keith Flick, including Yuna, and including, anyone else he happens to have an attachment to. Now, the story here, in my opinion, actually made Koku's story a bit more interesting than it was in the first season. Because in the first season, at first we didn't really know what Koku was all about until near the middle of the season, so it was kind of difficult to really get into his storyline. Here we know what Koku is like, and he certainly has made several changes for this season, while still being the Tokyo Ghoul-style badass that we still love him as. Unfortunately, since Keith is the one being kidnapped this season, that does mean he doesn't get as much to do as he did in the first. He does get a great episode, number 4, where he does get to remember his time with Gilbert Ross and Erica, and it did a really good job when it came to fleshing out his character more, but I do think if we spent more time with Keith, it would have been great. Though one thing this season absolutely does better than the first season is treating its female cast. Yuna and Lily were both characters with a decent amount of potential in the first season, but they mostly ended up as damsels in distress during the end of season 1. Here, though, they're generally back to being, legitimate characters with stakes in the plot. Yuna gets to fight a little bit, and Lily gets to be her hilarious self as she not only provides good comic relief, but also happens to be the heart of the story yet again. Unfortunately, while all that's good, and the animation of the series is just as stunning as it was in the first season, there are some drawbacks. Mainly that this is a season that's only half as long as the first one, at only 6 episodes. This would be fine, except for the fact that it's clearly part 1 of a 2-part story, to the point where the last episode even ends on a massive cliffhanger that isn't resolved yet. I don't know if Netflix is planning on releasing a second part to the season later on, but this is hardly a satisfying ending, especially considering that this season's storyline that was building up seemed like it had more potential than the storyline in the first season. On top of the shorter length, the ending theme of the series was ultimately changed, but I like this one a bit more. I know a lot of people liked the first season's ending theme, but this one just has more hyperactively entertaining moments and feels more like a shonen theme song, which, considering this is more of a shonen-focused arc with Koku involved, I think was very appropriate. Especially considering that the fights in this season are just as good as they were in the first. In some cases, they even surprised me more than the first season did. Especially considering Kirasame and his posse get to lay into our characters sometimes, especially one in particular named Asagiri, and I honestly think that she, as well as most of the other characters who were introduced in the season, are great additions to the cast. But it certainly feels like an unfulfilling part 1 overall. So despite some good animation and some great fights, this did seem as kind of a disappointment. Hopefully that gets remedied with another season or part 2 of season 2. But for now, I'd just say you can watch it if you're a fan of Be the Beginning, but if you're not, then there's not much to enjoy here. I'm going to give Be the Beginning Season 2 Succession a 6.5 out of 10. See you next time.